I started teaching writing when I was trying to support myself as a writer, and I started by teaching high school students. And I found that they were desperate for some rules that would work. They were tired of getting the word "awk" in the margins from teachers. Because people had stopped teaching grammar, it was seen to be not encouraging to creativity. So I wanted to come up with a way to teach young writers some rules that would actually work to help their writing, that might come from grammar, but were more meaningful than grammar, or would actually have more to do with great expression than correct expression. And that was the idea behind Sin and Syntax. I have a new book. It's kind of a follow-up to Sin and Syntax. The title is Vex, Hex, Smash, Smooch. And it's really about the evolution of language, the history of English, and in particular, the history of the English verb. So I look at how and why verbs are the most important words in language and how they completely transform our writing. I don't have a degree in linguistics. In fact, I never studied linguistics at all. I grew up in a strange way. I grew up in rural Hawaii. Everyone that I knew did not speak standard English. They spoke Pidgin English, which is Hawaiian Creole. My parents spoke standard English. So we had what I call the reverse immigrant experience. We spoke standard English at the dinner table and Pidgin English everywhere else. And I think that gave me an ear for language. It was as though I was bilingual in English. I spoke this complete bastard tongue most of the day, and then I spoke correct English at home. And I grew up with a fascination about how and why the correct English was correct and the bastard English was better. It was more expressive, it was more fun, it seemed earthier and more real. So a lot of my interest is rooted in that, and I studied both those two Englishes. I studied French. I loved studying other languages, and that's where I learned grammar. I studied English literature in college, and I have a master's degree in journalism, and I worked for many years as a journalist. When I became an editor, I had already been teaching those high school students. I became fascinated as an editor with how to show reporters how to write better. And I came to linguistics very late in life. I just did a crash course in linguistics to prepare myself, just self-taught, to prepare myself for this latest book. But the fascination with language comes not out of having studied grammar or studied linguistics, but more out of having spent my entire life trying to figure out what makes language work. So I'm going to give you two examples of Pidgin English. The first, one of my favorites, my mother, as I said, she spoke grammatically correct English, and the local high school asked her to come and tutor what we call pilikia kids. Those are kids in trouble, the ones who tend to get D's in English. And so my mom was trying to teach them correct grammar. Well, one year my mother also had gone prematurely gray. She was quite young, but she was already gray, and she'd been coloring her hair for years. And one year she decided to just stop coloring her hair. And so Christmas vacation, she stopped coloring her hair. January, she went back to school, and her hair was completely white. And this little kid, Billy, this Pilikia kid, walks in the class and takes one look at her, stops dead in his tracks, and says, "Hey, Miss Maya, so fast come white your hair, yeah?" So what he was saying was, "Miss Mayor, your hair became white so quickly." But what he was saying was almost like a haiku or a little poem. "Eh, Miss Mia, so fast come white your hair, yeah?" And that's an example of how this bastard tongue to me is a lot more lively. And of course we can understand what the person's saying. Why make it grammatically correct? It's actually less expressive. My other favorite example is the story of Little Red Riding Hood, which I don't need to tell you in English because everybody knows it. And it has been translated into Pidgin or Hawaiian Creole, and it's a lot of fun. It features, we don't have wolves, so it features a wild pua'a, which is a cross between a domesticated pig and a Russian boar. They live up in the mountains. And so just to give you, and Little Lei Puahi is our Little Red Riding Hood. So one of my favorite lines, Little Lei Puahi, is going off to visit her grandmother, which we call Tutu. That's grandmother, our dear old lady in Pidgin. So she go leave the house. She get the cookies inside a lauhala basket. But she like take one shortcut to the Tutu's hale.
So she would go walk to the how tree first. Little did she know, live one wild pua'a in this how tree forest. So she walking down the path and the wild pua'a take one look at her and he'd tell, oh, who's this pocky little wahine walking down the path?
You know, it mixes Hawaiian words, Chinese words, English, and the syntax is all crazy, but it actually, what's fascinating about it is that it has a syntax. It's not just random. There is a syntax, there are rules, and we follow them. They just happen to be different rules from English rules, and that's what I think made me fascinated and made me want to look more deeply at linguistics, because there are some underlying rules that apply in all sentences. Those are the ones I want to tell writers about. I don't want to tell them, you know, don't end a sentence with a preposition. Don't split your infinitives, because that doesn't matter. What I want to figure out is what does matter in a sentence.